Okay, so please turn to this page and we'll do a few practice problems of these, and then I'll let you work on things independently / with your neighbor. But yeah, so also, have I told you guys how much I just love factoring? Like, factoring is so great. Okay, but anyway, so let's do a few examples of these. Okay, first things first, always check for GCF. So number 1, 3x squared plus 2x minus 8. None of those share a common factor, so don't have to factor out GCF. But next thing I'm going to do is check to see what the number in front of x squared is. Okay, the number in front of there is 3. So that means that a is 3. So that means I have to multiply a, 3 in this case, times negative 8, and that gives me negative 24. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to give me negative 24 and add to give me this middle number of 2, the one in front of x. So I have negative 24, multiply that, add to 2, so that would be positive 6 and, oops, I went this one, positive 6 and negative 4. Right, if I multiply those, I would get negative 24, and if I add them up, I would get positive 2, 6 minus 4. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to split this 2x into 6x minus 4x. And then these numbers on the outside, 3x squared and negative 8, are going to stay the same. So I have 3x squared plus 6x minus 8. So remember, that negative 24 is not part of the problem anymore. That was simply just to find the numbers 6 and negative 4. And now once I have this, I'm going to factor this by grouping. So I look at the first two terms, 3x squared plus 6x, and I factor out the greatest common factor, which happens to be 3x. And when I do that, I'm left with x plus 2. Now here I have negative 4x minus 8. If I have a negative here, I'm always going to factor out a negative, and the GCF would be negative 4. So I'd be left with x. And then remember, if I take a negative 8, divide by negative 4, I'm left with a positive 2. So I have 3x minus 4 are the terms out front, so that's going to be one of my quantities, and then x plus 2 is the matching one right there. So my final answer is 3x minus 4 quantity times x plus 2, the quantity of that. And again, you can always check your answer by FOILing it out. So if we did that, we'd have 3x times x gives me 3x squared, plus 6x minus 4x, that's right here, and then minus 8. So when you do that, you combine the like terms. So you go backwards from this step, and you end up with your beginning expression. So, woo! Okay, let's try number 2. So again, always check for GCF, step 1. No GCF, so step 2 is to look at what is in front of the x squared. So that, in this case, is a 7. So that tells me a is not equal to 1. So I can't just look for numbers multiplied to give me 6. I have to look for numbers that multiply to give me a times c, in this case 7 times 6, which is 42, and then add to give me negative 43. So hopefully you can see that that would be negative 42 and negative 1. Remember, if it multiplies to something positive and it adds to something negative, both numbers have to be negative. And then if it multiplies to something negative and adds something positive, like in this example over here, obviously it's going to have to be one of each. So you can kind of use these context clues to help you figure out which numbers you're going to have to use. So anyway, then I'm going to take those values and I'm going to uncombine like terms of negative 43x. So it's going to become negative 42x minus 1x. And then this plus 6 is just going to come on down, like Price is Right. And then 7x squared is also just going to come down. So I have 7x squared minus 42x minus x plus 6, and I'm going to factor that by grouping. So I take the first two terms, factor out the GCF, which is 7x, and I'm left with x minus 6. And then here, again, remember, write that negative 1 so you remember that you're factoring that out. Factoring out is really just undoing multiplication, which is really just dividing. So 6 divided by negative 1 leaves me with negative 6. So I have those numbers out in front, 7x minus 1 times x minus 6. And that is my final answer. Okay, let me see if there's any... Okay, yeah, so I'll give you a second to make sure if you're following along, if you're copying this down, that you get that. And then I'm going to skip down. I'm going to have you use these problems as practice, but then I'm going to skip down and do a few where you do have to factor the GCF first, because it just makes it a little bit more difficult, but not really. So go ahead and look down here at numbers 9 through 12. So it kind of gives you a little hint to remember to always factor the GCF out first. Now, you know, eventually these hints will not be given, and you're expected to know that you need to do that first before anything. So I'm going to go ahead and just look at number 9. So we have 6x squared minus 16x plus 10. So the greatest common factor of all these numbers, or of all these terms, I should say, is 2. So I'm going to go ahead right from the beginning, factor out of 2. I have 2 times 3x squared minus 8x plus 5. So now, from there, then I'm going to kind of ignore the 2. The 2 is kind of just along for the ride, and I'm going to focus on the 3x squared minus 8x minus 5 and treat that as if I'm just factoring that. So notice the a value is not 1, so I'm going to have to multiply that by 5. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to 15 and add to negative 8. So that would be negative 5 and negative 3. So again, the 2 is just hanging out for the ride, and I'm going to uncombine like terms for negative 8. And these guys are just going to come down, the 3x squared and the 5. So I have 3x squared minus 5x minus 3x and plus 5. 2 is just still hitchhiking along. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor by grouping in what's inside the parentheses. So 3x squared minus 5x, greatest common factor is x. I'm left with 3x minus 5. Here, greatest common factor is just negative 1. So I have 3x minus 5. Close those parentheses. 2 is still hanging out. And we have x minus 1 and 3x minus 5. So that would be my final answer. My biggest warning is just don't forget about the 2. A lot of people factor the 2 out. They put it out in front, but then they kind of get so distracted in factoring the quadratic that they forget that the 2 is there. So just kind of like, it just hangs out. It's just doing its thing. And then part of the final answer there. So don't forget about that one. Anytime, sorry, I went really fast there. But yeah, and then of course you can always redistribute everything to see that this would equal 6x squared minus 16 plus 10. But what I was going to say is on number 11, notice that we have a negative out in front. You do not want your a term, so that's the one in front of x squared, to ever be negative. It just makes factoring extremely complicated. So you always want to factor out a negative if that's the case. So like for number 11, the coefficient here in front of the highest exponent is negative 2. And notice that all these values have an x as well. So we want to make sure that we factor out the full GCF, which in this case would be negative 2x. And like I was saying, make sure you take that negative out. So then that would leave us with x squared. So this would become a plus 3x. And then 56 divided by 2 would be, so negative 2 would be negative 23. No. Sorry. 28. And then I would close those parentheses. Yeah. So then if I were to redistribute that in, you'd see I'd have negative 2x squared minus 6x. No, I'm sorry. Negative 2x to the third minus 6x squared, and then plus 56x. But now I have this nice little quadratic here, and it's nice because look, the a value became 1. So I don't have to worry about multiplying 1 times negative 28. I mean, I kind of do, but I'm just doing negative 28. And then multiplying to that, adding to 3. So that would be positive 7 and negative 4. And I'm going to just, like, I'm able to just plop that right in there because it is 1. So I know it's going to be x plus 7, x minus 4. So that was kind of the first half of, first half of day 2 notes was just finding those values, and it just goes right in there to x plus that number times x plus or minus the other number. And so that would be my final answer for that one. So I hope this helped, and of course you can like work together with the people. You know, if you understand it, help your neighbor if they don't. And when I come back, obviously, I'll be happy to review this and go over any questions that you still might have on this. So, but just thought I would try this video, see how it works, and yeah, I try not to be, you know, absent from school too often. But yeah, so anyway, thanks for listening, and I will see you guys after the weekend. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.